Hello and welcome to stage 16 of the Tour de France. We've got 4 leaders up the road right now, just starting the Col Daniel. And there's the King of the Mountains leader Gerrit-Jan Teunissen, so he's up amongst them yet again. Teunissen's already won a stage, but he's got a teammate with him today, Acasio da Silva, Marco Pantani of Adidas, and Marshall Gaillant of Fiat are the other 3 escapees. So they're leading by over 8 minutes ahead of the peloton. And that peloton entirely intact, including the race leader Stan Åkers. And here is the profile of what we're facing up in the last 70 plus kilometers. So a very difficult climb in the Col Daniel, a very long descent, and then we go up and over the Col d'Izoire. And at the very end of the stage, inside the last 2 kilometers, there's a very vicious little uphill. So not a very kind finish to a hard stage. Back in the pack, it's Evian led by Kim Anderson doing the work at the front of the group, and there's Andy Schleck. Sandwiched between an Evian and a Kelme rider, and he has gained a lot of time over the past couple stages, perhaps thinking he could actually get in the yellow jersey, and that seemed a bit unthinkable after the first time trial. So Evian doing a lot of work for Andy Schleck, and La Vie Claire as well, looking after the interest of Gösta Petersen, who's well up on GC. We're getting a look at Andrew Hampsten now, who's climbed up into the top 10. A very rough start to the Tour de France, but he was quietly very strong in the Pyrenees. He was there in the hillier stages of the second week and is now in 8th place as we start the big Alpine stages. And he's with his teammate Pedro Delgado, who's a very good climber in his own right. I'm not sure how much attacking we'll see on the Col Daniel from this group of riders, considering it's still a very long way from the finish. And there's Fred Moncassin, the first out the back for Fiat. But I think everyone's going to get through the time cut today. Not enough kilometers to really do the damage for the sprinters. And the gap to the leaders has come down. It's just over 7 minutes, but still a very healthy advantage. And these riders are around 7 kilometers from the top of the Col Daniel, and they'll have that really long descent to pull out some more time over the peloton. And De Silva's done a lot of work today. He's been dropped. It's Pantani and Teunissen turning on the pressure, and Gaillant's gone too. So the 2 strongest climbers taking off on their own. And they're also fighting each other for the King of the Mountains points. Gerrit-Jan Teunissen with a huge lead, perhaps unassailable, considering he'll score well today. But Pantani has been climbing the leaderboard over the past few stages. So that jersey, a point of contention between the 2 in addition to a possible stage victory. So they head up the narrow switchbacks, up into the clouds. The Col Daniel, one of the highest mountains in the Tour de France, over 2,700 meters in height. At the very top. Within France, only the Col de la Bonnette is taller. And actually we're in Italy now, because at the top of this mountain we will re-enter France, so climbing from the Italian side. And that'll be music to the ears of Marco Pantani, who'll look to put on a show for the home supporters, and there's the attack. Pantani's launched the acceleration, he's got Teunissen in his wheel. So far, Teunissen not been broken yet. Pantani still piling on the pressure and not letting up. This is a big attack by Pantani. Let's see if he's overcooked it, because Teunissen is going to counter. Pantani grabbing the wheel, and I think today these 2 riders have the measure of each other, because with 1K to go, neither can get rid of the other. So we'll see if Pantani lets Teunissen set the pace over the top. And after all that attacking, these 2 have pulled out over 4 minutes ahead of their former breakaway companions. And there's another acceleration by Pantani, just for the mountain's points. So in the highest mountain of the Tour de France, it's Pantani who takes maximum points. Teunissen will take second. It looks like Gaillant and De Silva might link up together here. And meanwhile, this is the group behind. Just 28 riders remain. It seems that all of the big contenders are in this group. couple La Vie-Claire riders just dangling off the back, including Seal Guimard. I think he'll get back on the descent. That's Henny Kuiper, who's up in the top 10. Setting a very light tempo, not wanting to do any attacking. So a bit of a truce in the peloton. They'll go over the Col d'Aniel and tackle the long descent, and I think a lot of riders will get back on terms with that group of 28 riders. Meanwhile, at the head of affairs, Tunisu has caught Pantani on the descent, although I think Pantani has waited for him, because this far from the finish, it really does not make sense to go way off on your own. So these two will have to work together in the Valley Road to maintain their advantage over the peloton. And there's the virtual KOM jersey in the top right, Tunisu still with a huge lead, and Pantani now up into second place with 39 points. Still a very long way behind the leader, Tunisu. So we head into the valley towards Chateau Queyras. Then we'll head on to the Col d'Izoire. The Col d'Izoire, one of the most famous mountains in the Tour de France. Outside of the Col du Galibier, in the olden years of the Tour de France, the Col d'Izoire was the most famous mountain in the Alps. In the 1950s, when Louison Boulbet won 3 tours in a row, he won the Col d'Izoire stage all 3 years. And the great Eddy Merckx also attacking on this climb pretty often. So plenty of stories in the lore of the Tour about the Col d'Izoire. We're into the short valley, approaching the climb. Now Tunisu and Pantani, with the minutes that they could gain today, will climb even further up GC. Pantani already up into the top 20, and Tunisu in 31st place. And those two little climbers who were almost last in the Tour de France after the cobbled stage, using the breakaways in the mountains to get back in the race. And there's Gilbert and Hincapie trying to get back onto this peloton. Those two have had great Tours de France. Both have won stages, both have worn the yellow jersey, and both have worn the King of the Mountains jersey. And both very strong in the one-day classics. So very similar riders it seems this year for Gilbert and Hincapie. But here's Ceramica led by Eduardo Chozas, setting a pretty hard tempo at the front, only a handful of riders getting back in the peloton on the downhill. Normally we'd expect a lot of riders to get back as the pace slows down, but that's not the case this time. Ceramica looking to cause a bit of trouble for the rest of the field. And we're on to the Col d'Izoire. Pantani and Tunisu still trading turns. Da Silva and Marshall Gaillard still caught in the middle. And we're under 30 Ks to go now. And here's the peloton starting the climb, led by Evian. La Vie-Claire still close to the front of the race. And all of the big favorites in the top 10 are in that group. Eight Ks still to climb for Pantani and Tunisu. And we're getting up towards the steeper part now, as you can see in the near distance. And those switchbacks, that's where the Col d'Izoire gets a lot more steep. Gradients averaging around 10% at that point. And the advantage of these two was around 10.5 minutes when they started the climb. That's come down a little bit, but the peloton is not going to get back to these two, so one of Tunisu and Pantani is going to get another stage win. And for these two teams, Zulu Kingdom and Adidas, who are towards the bottom of the leaderboard, that would be a cause to celebrate. Da Silva has been caught. Actually, no, Da Silva is still at large. It's Gaillard who's going to get caught first. So he's sat up. He won't get anything else out of today's stage. And it's Ceramica who are still setting a hard tempo at the front of the bike race. They just caught Da Silva. And I think this peloton is going to start thinning out pretty soon. Here comes Jean-Pierre Donguillaume. Evian still with plenty of support. Multiple riders as well for Blackberry and Kelme. And I think Henny Kuiper is all that's left for Stan Ockers and Bianchi Campagnolo. So we'll see if the other teams choose to attack them. 3 kilometers still to climb for the breakaway riders. Around 5.5 to go for the peloton. There's the dangerous Andy Schleck. He still needs to gain time. He's 1 minute 31 seconds behind Ockers, and there's still another time trial on stage 20. So he needs to make some inroads, and if it's going to happen on today's stage, it needs to happen very soon. Meanwhile, the 2 leaders nearing the top, their lead down to 8 minutes, and Tunisia is going to go ahead and launch an attack. Well, he might have tried to catch Pantani by surprise, but that hasn't worked. Pantani's still in his wheel, and Pantani's going to counter and go over the top. Tunisia grappling to get in his wheel, under 1k to the top of the Izoire. So a serious push by Pantani. He's going to win the climb again, and he's pulled out just a little gap over Gert-Jan Tunisia, and this time I don't think Pantani's going to wait. He's a much better descender than Gert-Jan Tunisia, and he really should take advantage of that. Meanwhile, in the group of favorites, it's Pedro Delgado who's launched the first big move. It's Gösta Peterson who's closed it down. He's got Andy Schleck, Stan Ockers, and Bjarne Riis. And those are the 5 that have gone. So Delgado has attacked his teammate Andrew Hampsten. I'm not sure how wise that was, but there's another group not far behind, and there's Hampsten, so he's getting back on terms. Frank Schleck is there, Kuiper, Jan Ulrich, Shozas, there's Tommy Prim just trying to hang on. But amongst the big names in this Tour de France, I think it's been a wash over the Col d'Izoire. None that much stronger than the other, and really the teams have not been riding very hard today. So La Plagne tomorrow will be the big showdown of the Alps, but still a big fight for the stage win. Pantani has pulled out a gap over 30 seconds over Tunisia on the descent. There's 8k still to ride. And Tunisia, well, his lack of descending is going to cost him another stage win. If you remember that stage into Bagnères de Luchon, where he cannot get back up to Philippe Gilbert in time. And Pantani, he's heading into Briançon, and I think Pantani's going to get himself a second stage win and move way up on GC. So the final switchbacks on the downhill, and the little Italian, who had such a dreadful start to the year, scoring almost no points at all. He had no victories until the Tour de France, and now he is showing what a great climber can do in the big mountains. And this is the steep part in the last kilometer. The citadel of Briançon, there's a fortress at the top, and Pantani is going to get there first. So we started the day in France, went into Italy, and descended back into France. In your stage 16 winner, it's Marco Pantani, ahead of Gert-Jan Tunisia, another high finish for the Dutchman. Meanwhile, this group of 13 who have stolen 4 minutes over the next group of riders. So these are the big favorites of the Tour de France, and Bjarne Riis trying to launch an attack on the downhill, but none of the other riders are going to let that get away. Now onto the steep part, and we could see some small time gaps here. Bjarne Riis will lead them up to the Flamme Rouge. That's Peterson and Schleck right behind him. Bjarne Riis looking to claw back whenever he can after that disaster at Pralou. And Gösta Peterson is going to lead home this group of around 13, 7 minutes back. Bjarne Riis is there, and Andy Schleck. And there's Ockers and Kuiper. So we'll see if these guys all get the same time. I think they will. Some leftovers riders there as well. They had a pretty good day. And here is the next group on the road, around 4 minutes back, being led home by George Hincapie. See 5 Evian riders in there, so some of the guys who gain time on stage 15 are going to lose it all today. They've been working for Andy Schleck, and the big mountain's a bit too tall for them, so that will damage their hopes in the team competition. And there was Marc Madio. He was in the top 10 at the start of the day, so I think he'll lose that position Over 12 minutes down for these riders. There's Philippe Gilbert. And now let's look at last on the stage. Magnus Backstedt, the new Flamme Rouge. After some riders have been eliminated, and he will be last today, so consolidating that position and the fight to be last place in the Tour de France. And a couple mountain stages left, and he could lock up that title. So the first stage in the Alps, a little bit anticlimactic for the big riders, but not so much in the breakaway as Pantani and Tunisse, a great duel at the front of the race, and it was Pantani who used the downhill to his advantage, winning the stage by 38 seconds over Gert-Jan Tunisse. Goes to Peterson, Bjarne Riis and Andy Schleck 3rd, 4th, and 5th at 7 minutes 12 back, so they've gained 7 seconds on the road on the yellow jersey of Stan Åkers. And the next group of Åkers, Kuiper, Frank Schleck, Tommy Prem, Hampsten, Eduardo Chozas, Jan Ullrich, and Pedro Delgado. Those were the big climbers in the group of favorites today. And a lot of the minor protagonists, like Marc Madio, Choban Peruena, Henri Onglade, Cyril Guimard, they've lost around 5 minutes on that group of the yellow jersey. So too has Alaphilippe. It's been a bit quiet over the last few stages. Put another 7 minutes in hand for Pantani. He's going to move way up on GC. And there's the general classification. Stan Åkers still leading. Andy Schleck has gained back a few seconds. His deficit now just 1 minute 24 seconds. Peterson still third. He's now within 2 minutes at 1:55. Bjarne Riis still fourth. Tommy Prem fifth. Then Ullrich, Kuiper, Hampsten, Delgado, and Madio rounding out your top 10. So the time gaps going out a bit to the riders on the fringes of the top 10. They've lost some big time on that split over the top of the Col d'Izoire. Tomorrow's big showdown on La Plana, I think, will be the final big stage on the road to sort out these riders on the leaderboard. In the points jersey competition, it's Jamaldine Abdujaparov still with a huge lead over Andre Dargod. So I think that green jersey might just about be wrapped up, even if it isn't mathematically. It's a huge lead for him. And Tunisse consolidating his lead in the King of the Mountains competition. Pantani gained some ground, but still a lot of work to do. And Zulu Kingdom, because of Tunisse's breakaway, extending in the team competition. But the big queen stage of the Alps is tomorrow. We'll see you then.